Joseph, thanks for coming in again.
Good evening, Devin.
The JSE falling today, but I mean, when you look back, it's been the 5th consecutive month of gains, April, for the JSE. So not a bad start to the year, has it been?
This has been one of the best, I think, start for the JSE in the recent years. Remember, last year it was just terrific. So to really get about 8% in the first quarter, to end of April, we're sitting about 10.5% is massive, given that last year we're down about 12%. So certainly, I think it's a good boost for investors, and especially ahead of the elections that are coming next week. And certainly just lagging a little bit behind the U.S., which is now back to the highs it recorded last year.
And then eyes on the rand as always before the election. I've seen reports saying that, well, look, you know, generally the rand might just start sliding after a few weeks after the elections. That's been what history has told us. And then, of course, you have commentators telling you whether or not a full-blown ANC win, which is expected in this election, will be actually good for the rand stability. What's your take on the rand and elections in general?
There's very massive volatility. I think what happens there is obviously change of policy, which has been always the biggest issue. But this year, in particular, 2019 elections, the issue about the Reserve Bank, remember they've been talk about there need to be nationalization of the Reserve Bank, and the ANC adopted that policy, but there's lots of resistance and I think argument against that. So I think the market tends to look to be very negative in terms of whether there will be any changes. But we're all aware that the president is popular, I understand, more than the party. And certainly I think investors, both global and domestic, are looking for continuity in policies and possibly more strengthening and clarity in terms of the direction South Africa is going to take. The rand has been very volatile, and I think the volatility has basically due to issues between China and America, what will happen on the trade issues, but also the oil prices. We saw that, you know, last week when the oil was going to about 74, 75, the rand was weakening, and certainly the oil price has been coming down a little bit. So there's a bit of strength there that has come through the rand, but not significant, as you said earlier on. Yeah.
So quite interesting. I mean, we are at mercy more of the international scene than we are domestically. So Astral Foods are telling us that second half earnings are down 55%. What's surprising to me is that shareholders doesn't look like they really care about that. The share was positive today.
It's massive. It's very, very contrarian and I think unbelievable. Remember, it came from a low base and reported massive, like 400% growth last year, and all of a sudden the share has been sliding. So this time they're basically talking about feed costs that has gone higher. Last year they were talking that they made profits because there was a bumper harvest the previous year, maize prices and certain things were lower. But this time it's the production costs that are higher. But also they're saying apart from the cost going higher, in terms of production and feed, they're also saying that the selling price has been quite low. There's a lot of people also who are doing chicken runs and a little bit of farming, so you're always going to see pressure in those. But certainly I think it's purely about management in terms of how they manage the infrastructure, how they manage the costs, and certainly to balance with their selling prices.
But this is not really a reflection of imported chicken, is it?
No, I think it's management. It's more to do with management and local issues. The imports of chickens, whether from Brazil and other areas, I think that debate or discussions has cooled down a little bit. So this is basically company-specific issues, because I think if you look at some of the food producers, I don't think the share price has been doing badly at all.
Before you go, last one. So SARS now wants to use non-intrusive technology to track a cigarette box from manufacture right up until its selling point, and this all in the effort to actually make sure that taxes are paid. So, at the end of the day, good move for the coffers, I would think.
This is a big industry, certainly, I think, for us, and this is where, evasion of tax and illicit trading really happens. I think there's been massive talk about that. You remember British American Tobacco threatened that they have to tighten, really, the borders, with South Africa, and certainly, the illicit trades that is higher than actually what BAT was doing. And I think this is really just to tighten the loose ends so that, in terms of their target, in terms of collection of taxes, they get better. Remember, you mentioned earlier on in terms of the trade deficit, the trade surplus, which is quite nice, but we still have a budget deficit. So we're still looking at a fiscal deficit of about 4.2, which means SARS needs to collect more money, and certainly they need to be able to put their systems together so that both from the individual and the companies in particular, the sin taxes won't be able to come through as long as people have got other ways of trading.
Quite. And Joseph, just lastly, I'm not quite sure whether you took a closer look at the story, but I mean, really a good turn of events for Edcon. If the Competition Commission has now approved a company to go ahead and acquire it, surely this is good news for a number of people that were worried about jobs there.
Awesome. I think tomorrow is Workers' Day. Certainly the workers for Edcon will be very excited to hear that story. Remember last year they were talking about really speaking to the landlords to say, can we reduce the rental space? Otherwise, you're going to get 10,000 people without jobs. And they've been betting to just really get it back on track. They've got very good brands, CNA and other brands they are. So that will be very good news, I think, if they can do that. And if the Competition Commission can certainly understand sometimes scale is good. Because what we want in the country is people to be employed. When there's security of income, there's security of pensions. And remember, if we've got a budgeted deficit, it means the only money that is in the economy is private money through retirement funds and personal income.
Joseph, thanks very much indeed for
the
insights.